Daniel Thornton set down the quarterly report and reached for the charity envelope routine, something his assistant had flagged for the board meeting. Inside were 2 letters, both addressed to Santa. The first one opened. "Dear Santa, please send me a husband. That's my mommy's wish every time she cries." Sire, the child's handwriting was endearing, and the sentence had that innocent, unpolished quality children have. He stared at the line. Then he saw the second letter tucked behind it. Adult handwriting, messier, like it had been written late at night. Same request, different words. "My daughter believes in magic, and tonight I need to believe too." Across the table, someone was talking about tax deductions. Daniel's thumb stayed on the paper, right where it said the mother's name, Sarah Mitchell, Seattle. The letter didn't ask for money. His heart beat a little harder than it should have. The board meeting ended. Daniel stayed in his chair, the letters folded in his jacket pocket. When his assistant appeared with her tablet, he waved her off without looking up. He spread both letters on the conference table. The child's decorated with crayon drawings of a stick figure family. The mother's with no decoration at all, just raw honesty that felt like reading someone's diary. He searched her name on his phone. Sarah Mitchell, Seattle. Sparse results, no social media, just a mention in her late husband's obituary from 2 years ago. Thomas Mitchell, construction worker, survived by wife and daughter. There was a photo. Young couple, him in plaid with his arm around her, both smiling. Daniel sat back and looked out at Seattle's spread 43 floors below. From up here, the city looked manageable, orderly. But those letters weren't about spreadsheets or strategies. They were about loneliness, the kind that made a woman write to Santa Claus in the middle of the night. He understood that loneliness. Jennifer had been gone 3 years, and he'd filled the space with work, with late nights at the office, with anything that kept him from thinking about empty penthouses and his son Owen asking when Dad would be home for dinner. He called Marcus Hayes, his oldest friend. Marcus answered with easy humor. "Let me guess, you're still at the office. I need a favor." Daniel told him about the letters, about the woman's name, about the feeling in his chest that wouldn't settle. "What do you want to do? Meet her as someone normal, not as Daniel Thornton, CEO? That's insane. Every woman since Jennifer has seen the company first, the money. I'm tired of being a balance sheet." Daniel stood, walked to the window. "I still own that garage on Capitol Hill. I can work there, use the apartment nearby. Just be Dan for a while." Marcus sighed. "When this blows up, I get to say I told you so. Deal." Daniel looked at the letters one more time. Tomorrow, he'd find Madison's Diner. Tomorrow, he'd be Dan Miller, mechanic, single father, just a guy looking for coffee. Tonight, he needed to go home to Owen. Jennifer would have insisted on it. The elevator descended, his reflection multiplying in polished doors. In the parking garage, he stood by his Mercedes for a long moment. Tomorrow, he'd drive the Toyota Tacoma. Tomorrow, he'd be someone different, or maybe more himself than he'd been in years. Sarah Mitchell had stopped believing in magic around the time Tom died. It eroded slowly until she was operating on pure survival. Work, Emma, sleep, repeat. But Emma still believed, and when her daughter presented the letter to Santa with that serious 6-year-old face, Sarah had promised to mail it. She'd even written her own that night, wine and exhaustion lowering her defenses enough to put words to the loneliness. In the morning, she'd almost thrown it away, but Emma had been so excited she'd mailed both letters, telling herself it was harmless. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning before the breakfast rush, a man walked into the diner. Tall, broad-shouldered, jeans and canvas jacket that had seen use. His hair needed cutting. He looked tired, not sick tired, but carrying something heavy tired. He sat at the counter. Sarah grabbed a mug. "Coffee, please?" Black. His voice was quiet, rough. When he looked up to thank her, their eyes met. His were dark gray, and something in them made her pause. Not attraction exactly, more like recognition. "New in town?" "Sort of. Starting a job nearby." "Welcome to the neighborhood,"
I'm Sarah. Dan. His hands wrapped around the mug, calloused and rough. Good coffee. It's terrible coffee, but thanks. The corner of his mouth lifted. Okay, it's terrible, but it's hot. She smiled despite herself, which felt strange, like trying on clothes that didn't fit anymore. The morning rush arrived, and Sarah got busy with that familiar dance of orders and timing. Dan stayed for 2 hours, nursing coffee, occasionally looking up to watch the diner's rhythm. When he left, he put a 20 down for a $7.50 tab. The change. Keep it. Welcome to the neighborhood gift. He stood taller than she'd thought. I'll probably be back tomorrow if that's okay. We're open at 6. Madison appeared after he left, hip-checking Sarah. That man was watching you like you were the only person here. He was just being friendly. Madison tucked the 20 in Sarah's apron. When's the last time you let yourself be watched like that? Dan came back the next day, and the day after. Always morning coffee, always at the counter, always tips that were generous, but not so generous she could refuse without awkwardness. Small talk accumulated into conversation. He was a mechanic at Thompson's garage, raising his 7-year-old son alone. His wife had died 3 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry, Sarah said. Thanks. You? 2 years. Construction accident. They stood in that moment. 2 people who'd survived something terrible, acknowledging it. Then Emma burst through the door, early dismissal, and climbed onto the stool next to Dan, launching into why her teacher was wrong about penguins. Dan listened like Emma's opinions were the most important thing he'd heard all day. Are you married? Emma asked, suddenly. Emma, no, Dan said, unbothered. I'm not. Do you have kids? A son. Owen, he's 7. Emma's face turned serious. Can he come here sometime? Maybe if your mom says it's okay. Sarah found herself nodding. Saturday at the park. Saturday works.
That Saturday, Sarah learned Owen Thornton was shy and sweet and deeply attached to his father. For an hour, she and Dan sat on a bench while their children invented soccer rules that changed every 5 minutes. She's great, Dan said, watching Emma. So's yours. You're doing a good job. So are you. The simplicity shouldn't have affected her so much, but Sarah's throat tightened. No one had said that in 2 years. She looked at Dan, and he was watching her with those gray eyes, and this time she didn't look away. Coffee sometime? Just us? I can ask Madison's daughter to babysit. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Their first date was at a nicer diner, but not so nice. Sarah felt out of place. They talked for 3 hours without noticing. Daniel told her about learning mechanics from his father, about the relief of fixing things that stayed fixed. Sarah told him about nursing school, about dreams she'd put away but couldn't quite let go of, about guilt over resenting how hard everything was. You're allowed to be tired, Dan said. So are you. When he drove her home, they stood in the yellow hallway light, suddenly awkward. He didn't try to kiss her, just touched her hand briefly, his calloused fingers rough against hers. Can I see you again? I'd like that. After he left, Sarah paid the sitter, checked on Emma, then sat on her bed and cried, not from sadness, but from relief, from feeling something other than numb, from hoping, despite knowing better, that maybe magic wasn't completely dead. The lie grew heavier every time Sarah looked at Daniel with honest eyes and told him something true. He'd been Dan Miller for 3 weeks, and the role felt more real and more wrong simultaneously. He worked at Thompson's garage 4 days a week, actually worked, learning transmissions, getting grease under his nails. The other 3 days, he was Daniel Thornton, CEO, wearing suits and making million-dollar decisions. Marcus kept warning this couldn't last. Daniel knew he was right, but couldn't figure out how to tell Sarah without losing her. Owen knew something was different. Daniel had explained they were keeping some things private, that people needed to know each other as people first. Owen had accepted this with childhood trust, but sometimes Daniel caught confused looks when he switched between Dan and Daniel. Sarah's 5th floor walk-up was small enough Daniel could see everything from the doorway. When she'd first invited him for dinner, she'd apologized for the space. He'd wanted to tell her he'd trade his penthouse for this warmth in a heartbeat. Instead, he'd said it was perfect. Emma had decided Owen was her best friend. Most weekends, the four of them were together. Parks, museums, cheap theaters. Daniel paid carefully, never too much, always casual. Sarah noticed anyway, sometimes watching him with unasked questions. One night on her cramped sofa, knees touching, Sarah said, "You're not just a mechanic, are you?" Daniel's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes you seem like you're from a different world. The way you talk, the things you know." She picked at a loose dread. "If you don't want to tell me, that's okay. Whatever it is doesn't change how I feel." This was his moment. He could tell her everything. But what if she didn't understand? What if this fragile thing shattered when money entered it? "I used to work in an office before Owen gave it up to be more present." True, in a way. Sarah nodded, accepting it, but Daniel felt the dishonesty between them like a pebble in his shoe. They kissed that night for the first time, careful and sweet. When he left, he sat in the Tacoma with his head against the steering wheel, hating himself. The Harbor Project was Thornton Industries' biggest development in 5 years. Daniel checked the site weekly, early mornings before the garage. That Tuesday, he was reviewing progress photos when his phone rang. His project manager, voice tight with panic. East support structure failed, 3 men trapped. Daniel was already moving. "I'm 10 minutes out." He made it in 7, parking the Mercedes by emergency vehicles. The site was chaos. Fire trucks, ambulances, workers standing around. The project manager met him at the fence, fear clear on his face. "Show me." A load-bearing column had failed, taking down the section above, trapping 3 men 30 feet down. The fire chief was arguing about stability, refusing to send men in until engineers confirmed safety. How long? 4 hours minimum. 4 hours. Daniel looked at the collapsed section, at families behind police tape. He thought about Jennifer in the hospital, about helplessness while someone suffered. 4 hours was too long. "Get me the site plans." Before becoming a developer, Daniel had been a structural engineer. He'd worked construction through college, learning how buildings went up and came down. He'd given it up for business, but the knowledge remained. He spread plans across his car hood, tracing load paths, calculating stresses. The fire chief approached, ready to argue. "I'm going in." "Sir, you can't. I'm a licensed structural engineer. This is my project. There's an access point through the southern shaft that's stable. We shore it properly. We reach them in under an hour." Something in his voice convinced them. 20 minutes later, Daniel was in a hard hat and harness, leading a rescue team through wreckage. The space was tight, unstable, concrete dust thick in the air. He moved carefully, testing each step, reading the building's stress points like old muscle memory. They found the first man pinned under a beam. Daniel supervised the lift, hands steady despite adrenaline screaming through him. The second and third men were trapped in a pocket that had protected them. Getting them out took another hour of careful work, the structure groaning around them. When they brought the last man up, Daniel stood at the collapse edge and watched paramedics load him into an ambulance. Families were crying, workers clapping. Someone shouted about the CEO saving the day. Daniel barely heard it. He was covered in dust and sweat, hands shaking now that it was over, thinking Jennifer would have been proud.
News trucks had arrived. He saw them at the site edge. Cameras pointed his way. His phone buzzed non-stop. Daniel walked to his car, needing to leave before the crash hit. He didn't think about Sarah watching the news until his phone rang for the 30th time. Not the board, not Marcus. Sarah. He stared at the screen. She'd seen it. Of course she'd seen it. Every television in Seattle was playing footage of Daniel Thornton, CEO, personally leading a rescue. Dan Miller, the mechanic, wouldn't be on the news. The phone stopped ringing. A text. "We need to talk." Daniel sat in his car, covered in dust. Another text. "Madison's tonight after my shift. Don't make me wait. I'll be there." He put his head in his hands and tried to figure out what he could possibly say. Sarah's hands shook, pouring coffee. Madison took the pot and told her to sit before she broke something. The diner was empty, closing time. Chairs up, door locked.
Sarah sat at the counter where Dan had sat that first morning. The television kept playing footage. Daniel Thornton in a hard hat, emerging from wreckage, looking every inch the billionaire he was. The caption identified him as CEO of Thornton Industries, self-made millionaire, one of Seattle's most eligible bachelors. Owen attended private school in Capitol Hill. Owen. That hurt as much as the rest. Emma talked about him constantly, considered him her best friend. The knock came at 8. Sarah looked through the glass and saw Daniel, still in work clothes, still covered in dust. She unlocked the door and let him in without speaking. "I'm sorry," he said. "For which part? Lying about who you are or letting me find out on the news?" "Both. All of it, Sarah." Don't explain like I'm an employee." Her voice shook. "You let me tell you about struggling to pay rent, about working doubles for school supplies, and the whole time you were a billionaire playing dress-up? That's not what I was doing." "Then what were you doing, Daniel?" She used his real name like a weapon. "Because it looks like you were slumming, having an adventure with the poor single mom." He flinched. "I read your letter to Santa." The air left Sarah's lungs. "What? The letters? Yours and Emma's? They came through Seattle Children's Foundation. I'm on the board. I got your letters and they broke something in me." He stepped closer. "I never read them before. My assistant handles it, but that day I read yours." "So you decided to find me like a project?" "Every woman since Jennifer died has seen the money first, the company, the lifestyle. They don't see me." His voice roughened. "Your letter asked for someone kind. Not rich, not successful, just kind. I thought if I met you as Dan, you'd see me instead of the balance sheet." "You lied." "I simplified." "You lied," Sarah repeated. "You met my daughter. You let me tell you I couldn't afford things while you're worth millions. Do you understand how that feels?" "I wasn't pitying you. I was admiring you." "Don't try to make this romantic. You deceived me for weeks. Emma loved Owen. She cried every night, but Owen's life is nothing like hers. Private school, nanny, penthouse." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "You're right. I should have told you sooner. I was terrified you'd see the money instead of me. Days turned to weeks, and I couldn't figure out how to tell you without losing you." He paused. "But everything else was real. How I feel about you, how Owen feels about Emma, the person I am with you. That's who I want to be." "I don't know how to believe you." "I know." They stood in the empty diner, distance feeling like miles. Sarah was so tired of being angry, of being alone, of wanting things she couldn't have. "I need time," she said finally. "Okay, no contact, no showing up, no explaining. I need space." "How long?" "However long it takes." Daniel headed for the door. His hand was on the handle when Sarah spoke again. "Those men today, you saved them." He turned. "I'm an engineer. It's what I know. Everything you told me about fixing things, about wanting work that matters, that was true. You just left out that you fix buildings instead of cars. Does that change anything?" Sarah didn't know. Daniel waited, then nodded once and left. Through the window, she watched him walk to a black Mercedes, sit there for a long time. Finally, he drove away, and Sarah locked up and went home to her daughter, who would be heartbroken. Daniel didn't call or text. He disappeared, and Sarah told herself that's what she wanted. But Emma asked about Owen every day, and her face crumpled each time Sarah explained they weren't seeing them for a while. Work became refuge again. Orders, refills, small talk with regulars who didn't know anything had changed. Madison gave sympathetic looks but didn't push. Sarah was tired of talking about feelings. The problem was she couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said, about women seeing his money first. She understood that. Actually, people had treated her like poor Sarah since Tom died, offering help that felt like pity. Daniel's deception was bigger, more elaborate, but the core, wanting to be seen as yourself instead of your circumstances, that she got. 3 weeks after their confrontation, Sarah was closing alone when someone knocked. She looked up expecting Madison and instead saw a woman in a designer coat that probably cost Sarah's monthly rent. Her smile was pleasant but cold. Sarah unlocked the door. "We're closed." "I'm Victoria Ashford. I wanted to talk about Daniel Thornton." Sarah stepped back. Victoria walked in, assessing the diner. "This is quaint." "What do you want?" "To give you context.
Victoria perched on a stool, careful not to touch the counter. I knew Daniel and I for years, board member, family, friends. We were supposed to marry before Jennifer. Her smile sharpened. He has a pattern, broken things he can fix. Jennifer was a recovering addict. He cleaned her up, married her, before she could relapse and ruin his image. Now you, poor single mom, another project. He gets bored when things are fixed. Get out. I'm helping you. Daniel needs things to build. Once you're stable, once the challenge is gone, he'll move on. Get out. Victoria stood, smoothing her coat. When he offers to pay your rent or your daughter's school, remember he's doing it for himself, because fixing things is how he proves he's empty. She left. Sarah stood in the empty diner, Victoria's poison dripping through her thoughts. Was that what she had been? A project?
She went home but couldn't sleep. Instead, she Googled Daniel Thornton. The results were overwhelming. Business success, philanthropy, dead wife, photos at charity events with beautiful women, speculation about his dating life, and there, 5 years ago, a mention of Victoria Ashford, longtime family friend, a photo of them at a gala, her hand on his arm. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "It's Marcus Hayes, Daniel's friend. We need to talk. Coffee tomorrow. I'm not here to manipulate. I'm here to tell you the truth." Sarah was exhausted. She didn't want more truth, but she texted back, "Madison's Diner, 7 a.m. Marcus Hayes was exactly what Sarah expected. Expensive, casual clothes, easy confidence. He ordered coffee and eggs, made small talk with Madison, then got serious when they were alone. "You're here to defend him." "Actually, I'm here to tell you you're right to be angry." He sipped coffee and grimaced. "Terrible. I know. Daniel said so too, first morning." Marcus sat down the cup. "He called me after he got your letters, told me he was going to find you. I said it was terrible. He did it anyway." "Why are you here?" "Because he's been miserable for 3 weeks, and because I know him well enough to know he screwed up, but not how you think." Marcus leaned forward. "Victoria came to see you." Sarah's face gave her away. Marcus nodded. "She's been trying to get Daniel back for years. She thinks eliminating competition will make him notice her. She's wrong." "She said Jennifer was a project." "Jennifer was recovering when they met, that's true, but she wasn't a project. She was the love of his life. When she died, part of him died. He threw himself into work for 3 years. Marcus paused. "Then he read your letters and something changed. I've known Daniel since college. I've never seen him care about someone like this. He's not trying to fix you. You're not broken. But he lied. He did. And that was wrong. But he lied because he was terrified of being seen as a checkbook. When you're rich like Daniel, everyone wants something." Marcus finished his eggs. "He's not perfect. He works too much. He uses business as armor, but he's genuine. The fact that he felt he had to hide tells you how many times he's been hurt." "I've been hurt too." "I know, and Daniel knows. When he talks about you, he doesn't talk about fixing you. He talks about how strong you are, how good a mother, how you smile at customers when you're exhausted." Marcus met her eyes. "That's not a project. That's respect." Sarah's throat tightened. "Why tell me this?" "In 3 days, Daniel has a charity gala, Seattle Children's Foundation. Victoria will be there, half of Seattle society, and Daniel is going alone because he can't imagine bringing anyone who isn't you." Marcus stood, pulled out his wallet. "I'm not saying forgive him, but if you want to understand who he is, come to the gala, see him in his world, then decide." He left cash and walked out. Sarah sat for a long time. Emma appeared eventually, climbing onto the stool. "Mommy, can Owen come over?" Sarah looked at her daughter's hopeful face and made a decision. "Let's go see them, both of them, right now." The penthouse was everything Sarah had imagined, and worse. Floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture like art, a kitchen bigger than her apartment. Owen answered the door,
face lighting up at Emma, then uncertain. Daniel appeared behind him. He looked exhausted, hair disheveled, wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt that made him look more real than Dan's clothes ever had. "Sarah, Marcus came to see me. I didn't ask him to." "I know." Sarah looked around. "This is real? Your actual life?" "Yes." Emma and Owen had disappeared. Sarah could hear them laughing. She missed him, cried every night for a week. He missed her too. They stood in the massive living room with its expensive emptiness. Sarah thought about Victoria calling her a project, Marcus saying she wasn't broken, Daniel saving those men because he had the knowledge. "There's a gala," she said. 3 days. "Marcus told you. He said you're going alone." Daniel looked at her, everything in his face, hope and fear and exhaustion. "I deserved to. I lied. I kept lying when I should have stopped. I don't get to ask you for anything." "You're right." Sarah walked to the window, looked down at Seattle, 43 floors below. "I'm asking you. Take me to the gala. Let me see your world. Then we'll figure out if there's any way to make our worlds fit." "You don't have to." "I'm choosing to. But Daniel, if you lie again about anything, we're done forever." "I won't, I promise." "Okay, I need a dress. I'm borrowing from Madison's daughter." Daniel smiled, small but real. "You could wear anything and be the most beautiful person there." "That's a lie." "It's the truth." Sarah rolled her eyes, but smiled too. When Emma and Owen emerged begging for a sleepover, she found herself saying yes. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. The dress fit perfectly, which Sarah took as a good sign. Daniel picked her up in the Mercedes, and she let herself appreciate it. Leather seats, smooth ride, the luxury. Owen was with his nanny, Emma with Madison. The gala was all chandeliers and marble, and people who looked born wearing tuxedos. Daniel's hand was warm on her back as they walked in. Sarah felt every eye turn. She heard whispers. "Who's that? Where's she from? Is that really Daniel Thornton with a waitress?" "You okay?" Daniel asked quietly. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He squeezed her hand. They found their table. Marcus winked. The others were polite but curious. Victoria Ashford was 3 tables over, and when she saw Sarah, her face went blank. Dinner was fine. Speeches were boring. Sarah watched Daniel in this environment, more formal, more careful, like armor. But when he looked at her, the armor cracked, and she saw Dan underneath. Both of them, the same person. After dinner, Victoria appeared. "Daniel, we need to talk. Board business." "Say it in front of Sarah." Victoria's smile sharpened. "The board has concerns about your relationship, the optics. CEO dating a waitress? It looks like you're not serious about your position." "Then the board can vote me out, Victoria. I mean it. You want my position? Take it, but stop using board concerns to interfere." Daniel stood, held out his hand to Sarah. "We're leaving."
They walked out. In the car, Daniel didn't start the engine. "I should have done that years ago." "Why didn't you?" "Easier to avoid confrontation, but I'm done with easy. Easy isn't real." Sarah looked at him, this man who'd rescued workers and lied to her, and just walked away from half of Seattle's elite. "Take me home. Your home." The penthouse felt different now, less empty. Daniel made tea because he was nervous, and Sarah sat on his expensive couch, imagining living in this world. It felt impossible, but 6 weeks ago, feeling anything other than numb had felt impossible too. "I read Jennifer's obituary," Sarah said. "She sounds incredible." She was. Daniel sat beside her, not touching, but close. "She'd like you. She had low tolerance for..." He stopped. "She'd appreciate that you called me out. I'm not replacing her. I know she was her own person. She's gone. I'll always miss her, but that doesn't mean I can't move forward." Sarah nodded. They sat in silence, drinking tea. Finally, she said, "Emma's letter asked for a husband for me. I laughed because how do you explain to a 6-year-old that life doesn't work that way, that magic isn't real? She looked at Daniel. But then you showed up. Maybe magic is real, just not how Emma thought. What way is that? She thought Santa would send someone perfect, but you're not perfect. You lied. You're stubborn. You work too much. You're complicated and flawed. Sarah smiled. But you're real. Maybe that's better than perfect. Daniel kissed her then, and it felt different from their first kiss, less careful, more certain. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. No more lies. You and Emma in my life completely. All the messy, complicated truth. That means Emma goes to Owen's school. You'll pay for things. People will talk. Let them talk. I have to trust you with my daughter's heart. I won't break it, I promise. Sarah pulled back. Okay, but I'm keeping my job and going back to nursing school, and we're doing this slowly. Deal. And you're telling the board if they have a problem with me, they can find a new CEO. Already did. Sarah laughed, and it felt good, felt real. She stayed that night in the guest room, and in the morning, Daniel made breakfast while she called Emma. Owen padded out in pajamas, saw Sarah, and beamed. Does this mean you're staying? Sarah looked at Daniel, thought about Emma's letter, about believing in magic, about second chances. Yeah, she said, I think it does. 6 months later, Sarah stood in their kitchen, not the penthouse, but a house with a yard, making coffee while Emma and Owen argued over whose turn it was to pick the movie. She'd finished her first semester back at nursing school with straight A's. Daniel had restructured his role to work fewer hours. Emma went to Owen's school now, but Sarah insisted on paying what she could. It wasn't perfect. They fought about money, about how much help she'd accept, about Daniel solving problems by throwing resources at them, but they talked it through. They showed up for each other. They chose each other every day, flaws and all. The letters were framed in their bedroom, Emma's and Sarah's, the ones that started everything. Sarah looked at them sometimes and thought about that night when she'd written to Santa in desperation, not believing but needing to, and how magic was real after all. Mommy, Emma called. It's Owen's turn, but I picked last time. Sarah smiled and headed to mediate, coffee in hand, Daniel's laughter echoing from somewhere in the house. This was her life now, messy and full, and nothing like she'd imagined, but real. And real was better than any fairy tale.